The dawn of our future, our true interstellar future, is not a distant aspiration. It is here, now, in this extraordinary, messy, and urgent moment. We live in a time when the universe, after billions of years of silent existence, seems to be leaning in, gently tapping us on the shoulder. This isn't a metaphorical encounter, it is physical, evidenced by anomalies registered in our most sophisticated scientific instruments, and occasionally perceived by human observers in aircraft. We are accumulating evidence that strongly suggests we are not alone, and that the initiation of encounters with something beyond our solar system, whether intentionally or accidentally, is upon us. Over the past decade, the data pointing toward the existence of extraterrestrial life, or at least the artifacts of highly advanced technological civilizations, have mounted with astonishing rapidity. While the search for microbial life on planets like Mars or Venus continues, the sheer statistical probability of life existing on one of the innumerous exoplanets residing in a star's habitable zone is exceptionally high. Soon, we will deploy spacecraft capable of sending back data within a human lifetime, opening new chapters in astrobiology. But perhaps the most profound shift is the scientific endeavor to search for near-Earth extraterrestrial artifacts, a pursuit now backed by both public and private funding. Our civilization's persistence depends entirely on whether we manage to mature rapidly enough to exist independently of our home planet and sun, and, should we be diligent and sufficiently intrepid, just perhaps an extraterrestrial assist has already been offered. One such opportunity, I believe, has already slipped through our collective human fingers. The data strongly support the possibility that in the year 2017, an extraterrestrial manufactured artifact passed through our solar system. That year, astronomers utilizing data from the Panoramic Survey Telescope and Rapid Response System, or PAN-STARRS, located at Haleakala Observatory in Hawaii, identified an interstellar object they named Oumuamua, a Hawaiian term translating roughly to scout. Based on the wealth of empirical data collected about this object, the most plausible interpretation is that it was of extraterrestrial manufacture rather than a naturally occurring interstellar rock. The evidence for this is compelling. Oumuamua's shape, remarkably long and flat, akin to a cosmic pancake or cigar, was unlike any space object we had ever experienced before. Crucially, the data demonstrated with certainty that its trajectory around the Sun was altered, not by the visible outgassing that accompanies all comets, but most likely due to it being gently pushed by solar radiation, much like NASA's rocket booster, 2020 SO, which Pan-STARRS also discovered in September 2020. Then there was Oumuamua's extraordinarily low velocity relative to the local galactic movement, measured at what astronomers refer to as the local standard of rest, or LSR. In the vastness of space, everything is constantly in motion relative to everything else. An object considered to be at rest, like Oumuamua, possesses a velocity that makes it comparatively stationary amid this incredible galactic flow. This is exceedingly rare, placing Oumuamua in the bottom 0.2% of all stars. Nature rarely positions objects exactly at the LSR. However, if human civilization wished to manufacture an object and station it at the LSR, that task would be well within our current technological capability. This is why I likened Oumuamua to a silent buoy our solar system happened to run into, rather than a missile intentionally aimed at us. Because we lacked the means to image Oumuamua, because we possessed no way of capturing it, and because our existing instruments were simply not designed or built for detecting near-Earth objects of potential extraterrestrial manufacture, our data remains, admittedly, inconclusive. Inconclusive data is, of course, the foundational condition of much of science, particularly at the leading edge of discovery. As I argued in Extraterrestrial, the first sign of intelligent life beyond Earth, of all the competing explanations for the observable behavior of Oumuamua, the simplest and most plausible one suggests it was manufactured, albeit not by us. Simple and plausible, of course, hold only if you grant the possibility that human civilization is likely not unique in the universe. For many, granting this possibility has been not merely a stumbling block, but a brick wall. To date, however, scientists seeking a purely natural explanation for Oumuamua's extreme elongation and smooth, non-gravitational acceleration have only encountered more walls of doubt. Consider briefly the hypothesis offered in March 2023 by Jennifer Berdner and Daryl Seligman, acceleration of one is Oumuamua from radiolytically produced H2 in H2O ice. This offered a refinement of Seligman's earlier 2020 hypothesis that Oumuamua was composed entirely of molecular hydrogen ice, an idea which, along with the subsequent hypotheses that it was pure water or pure nitrogen, was eventually acknowledged to be unworkable. Bergner and Seligman proposed in 2023 that perhaps cosmic ice composed partly of water and partly of hydrogen dissociated by cosmic rays in interstellar space might work. Perhaps, but certainly neither simply nor plausibly. First, we have no data suggesting nature produces interstellar icebergs made of water and hydrogen. Second, the proposed evaporation of hydrogen trapped in this hypothesized water-hydrogen comet would not fully explain Oumuamua's observed non-gravitational acceleration. Their models actually ignore the substantial cooling resulting from evaporating hydrogen, which, once accounted for, decreases the hypothesized outgassing effect by a factor of 3, rendering the model untenable as a complete explanation for Oumuamua's known properties. The fact that 5 years after Oumuamua's discovery, the scientific debate about its possible origins remains robustly unsettled is excellent news for science. It means the system is working, demanding evidence. That an extraterrestrial origin remains a non-starter for many scientists is, however, sobering news for human civilization. Since the publication of my work, I have often been asked about Day 2. What will happen immediately after humanity receives indisputable evidence of an extraterrestrial technological civilization? We already have our answer. The media will notice, a small fraction of the public will care. But the overwhelming majority of humans will continue living their lives without giving it much thought. Our politicians will chase re-election, businesses will seek profits, and Day 2 will feel remarkably similar to Day -1. This, I confess, would not surprise me. What was surprising and genuinely disappointing was the fact that over the subsequent years, a majority of the scientific community expressed a profound skepticism about this physical evidence that was far greater than the skepticism directed at scientific speculations, such as string theory, hypothetical dark matter particles, or the concept of multiverses. This is despite the glaring fact that to this day, we possess zero empirical data demonstrating a theoretical string, a dark matter particle, or a single universe other than our own. Scientists, in effect, appear more comfortable asserting the existence of phenomena they have no empirical evidence for than accepting the possible existence of a phenomenon. Extraterrestrial civilization, or ETC, for which we do possess tantalizing physical evidence. What this profound reluctance really boils down to is a critical realization. The question to answer isn't, what will we do on the day after we encounter evidence of ETC? The true question is, what will we do as we encounter ever more evidence of ETC? And that is precisely why I believe we are entering the interstellar era. Humanity is right now on the cusp of profound discoveries about our cosmic neighborhood. The universe is, quite literally, knocking on our door just as we are preparing to open it. The overwhelming likelihood is that incontrovertible evidence of extraterrestrial sentient intelligence is already on the threshold, perhaps mere months away. We need to prepare. This means building new instruments of observation and interception. It demands far greater transparency and coordination between scientists and governments worldwide. Arising from that transparency, humanity requires new expectations about how encounters with interstellar objects and eventually non-terrestrial life are likely to unfold. How we prepare, how we as a civilization and a scientific community choose to behave now will determine the psychological costs and benefits of this new era of sentient existence. For starters, we require a new vocabulary, one stripped of the stigma of science fiction. The rapid pace at which evidence of plausibly extraterrestrial technology can accumulate is captured by the fact that in 2022, the United States government admitted the existence of unidentified aerial phenomena, or UAP, previously known as UFOs. Notably, almost immediately after admitting UAP existed, America's military began firing missiles at them. Within the first 2 months of 2023, American planes destroyed a known high-altitude balloon of Chinese manufacture and 3 other unidentified objects. That these objects were most likely human-made does not diminish the chilling fact that we fired on them without being entirely certain of their origin. Just months earlier, humanity, for the first time in its history, began scientifically rigorous, multi-pronged initiatives to search specifically for alien artifacts. The first of these, the Galileo Project, which I direct, launched slightly before the government's public acknowledgement of UAP, and by 2022, the first of the project's observatories specifically designed to identify UAP went live. Within 2022 alone, Oumuamua went from being the only identified interstellar object to being chronologically the third of 4 detected interstellar objects. In that year, a review undertaken by my student Amir Siraj and myself of the catalog of fireball and bolide data, maintained by the Center for Near-Earth Object Studies, Xnoesis, was determined to have identified 2 interstellar meteors, IM-1 and IM-2. The data show that both are built of far tougher materials than the vast majority of space rocks originating in our solar system, and one of those 2, IM-1, awaits our recovery, resting at the bottom of the Pacific Ocean just north of Manus Island. Even without full access to all the classified data the United States government holds, we know the fragments rest within a 10-kilometer grid. During 2023, an expedition I am heading will, we hope, discover these fragments of an interstellar object. No matter what is discovered on that ocean floor, we need to prepare ourselves. Whether we acknowledge it or not, my generation and yours are living in the first years of a new era, one in which humanity steps into its interstellar future. We have never been so close to scientifically valid proof that life on Earth and human civilization are not alone in the universe. I am convinced that we are tantalizingly close not only to learning terrestrial life is not the only life in the solar system, but that human civilization is not the only civilization to exist or to have existed. I am also convinced that most of humanity is simply not ready for the profound shift in perspective this requires. Decades of reliance on science fiction have ill-served our civilization. In virtually all of these narratives, space and extraterrestrial life are mere backdrops for familiar genre narratives, horror, fantasy, romance, or action spectacles. Among the possible outcomes of our first contact with ETC, the least likely is a human-alien handshake in front of the White House, or a contest matching our missiles against their lasers. For reasons rooted in science and statistics, the far greater likelihood is that we will encounter ETC space trash or a defunct extraterrestrial AI probe, and the encounter will occur only because we actively sought it out. Along with building new tools and defining novel scientific research, humanity urgently needs to reset our cultural understanding and expectation of what it means to encounter an extraterrestrial object. At the leading edge of research and theory, astrophysicists, cosmologists, and astronomers are gathering data-informed insights into humanity's true meaning and purpose in this 13.8 billion-year-old universe. Embracing the fact that UAP exist, that interstellar material of exceedingly rare material strength is within our grasp, and that evidence of ETCs is going to rapidly mount means confronting the near and far future possibilities of humanity. The times we inhabit demand that we undertake this search with all the intellect, skill, dedication, and joy we can muster. Not just because we have evidence that UAP are real, and that some fraction of them might pose perceived threats, and not just because the evidence for ETCs is increasingly irrefutable, but because we live at a time of ever-mounting alarm over human-made existential threats, ranging from anthropogenic climate change to global warfare. All humans must embrace this work because our species stands at a critical crossroads. The next steps we, and especially our scientists, take, I am convinced, will decide if our civilization is destined to persist, spreading terrestrial life throughout the universe, and thereafter where humanity stands in the pantheon of cosmic civilizations. It is tempting, and indeed humanity's collective hubristic default, to presume we inherently warrant a place within that pantheon. The greater statistical probability, based on our current cultural practices, is that we absolutely do not. The best-known scale for assessing civilizations was conceived in 1964 by the Soviet astronomer Nikolai Kardashev. Kardashev dedicated much of his career to the theory and practice of searching for extraterrestrial life, but his scale remains his most popular contribution. By this measure, a civilization that has mastered the totality of its planet's energy resources is designated a Type 1. This is roughly where humanity currently sits. Once a civilization masters harnessing the total energy output of its host star, it is elevated to a Type 2. And a Type 3 civilization has learned to draw on the full energy of its entire galaxy. The Kardashev scale has merits, but I believe it has one clear deficit. Energy consumption tells us too little about the culture of a civilization, its priorities, its ambitions, and its expectations for itself and for life on and off its home planet. I propose a more useful perspective. The technological level of civilizations should be measured not by how much power they tap, but rather by the ability of that civilization to reproduce the astrophysical conditions that led to its very existence. By this cosmic standard, a C-class civilization is one that is able to recreate habitable conditions on its planet without relying on the energy of its home star. For instance, had the dinosaurs attained this level of technological ability, then the consequences of the Chicxulub impactor, an asteroid or comet roughly 10 miles wide that struck Earth 66 million years ago, would have been devastating, but likely not an extinction-level event. While NASA's Double Asteroid Redirection Test DART in 2022 was the first demonstration of planetary defense technology, the ability to impact and possibly divert an Earthbound object, our current ability to nudge anything the size of Chicxulub remains zero. Nevertheless, we can theoretically imagine some fraction of humanity facing a similar crisis, surviving autonomously off nuclear energy and food grown in enclosed, self-sustaining greenhouses. A B-class civilization could adjust the habitable conditions in its immediate environment to be independent of its host planet and host star. A human civilization operating at a B-class level would be capable of truly building a functional Noah's Ark, spreading first throughout the solar system, then beyond it, and most likely relying upon advanced AI probes with the programming and technology capable of restarting terrestrial life on distant exoplanets. These human-built space arks would hedge entirely against the destruction of Earth and the Sun. And at the absolute top rung of this cosmic ladder would reside an A-class civilization. This is one capable of recreating the cosmic conditions that gave rise to its existence, namely, a civilization capable of producing a baby universe in a laboratory. Achieving the distinction of an A-class civilization is physically plausible by the measures of physics as we know it. The related challenges were already discussed in a paper co-authored in 1990 by Edward Farhi, Alan Guth, and Jamal Gouven. Their assertion, "We are suggesting," that the laws of physics as we know them permit in principle the creation of a new universe by human initiative. The language of mathematics applied to our known physical laws points us toward the testable hypothesis that the opening phrase of the book of Genesis might more accurately be rendered, "In the beginning there was the lab coat." This leads me to a far more difficult question: where, as of 2023, would humanity actually fit on this cosmic scale of civilizations? I believe we are closer to a D-class civilization, one actively degrading its home planet's ability to sustain the conditions that prolong both life and civilization. And here, we begin to perceive our predicament. but also our profound opportunities. I am convinced that if we are to seize these opportunities, all of humanity must learn to lean into science. Science will grant us a new vocabulary for the upward trajectory of our civilization. Science will guide the technology to grant us the necessary tools, and science will best determine why the psychological costs of encounters with ETC will, in practice, quickly become extraordinary benefits. Our interstellar present raises practical questions of science and technology. New, dedicated telescopes will be built. New spacecraft will be designed and launched. These actions will accelerate the discovery of non-terrestrial life, of artifacts we did not manufacture, and of evidence of other civilizations. While the precise timing of these discoveries is unknowable, what is certain is that humanity becoming an interstellar species raises not only practical questions, but touches on the most fundamental philosophical questions of our sentient existence. Already, the practical and the philosophical cannot be separated. I believe our interstellar future scientifically raises and helps to answer the most profound questions conscious intelligence confronts. It is in the spirit of this optimistic, scientific, and philosophical enthusiasm that I hope, before the end of 2023, to find and hold physical evidence of an extraterrestrial artifact. And maybe, just maybe, when I find it, it will have a button or two that I can push. In June 2021, the United States Department of Defense delivered a report to Congress confirming that military pilots have perceived and photographed UAP, that these objects are undeniably real, and that despite decades of gathering data on the phenomenon, the Department of Defense does not know what the objects are. Promptly dubbed the Pentagon Report, its release remains one of the most significant indicators that humanity is living through the early, turbulent years of a new cosmic era. February 4, 2023, underscored that our transition to this new era will be bumpy, even violent. On that date, an aerial phenomenon we could explain. A Chinese-manufactured balloon was shot down by U.S. Air Force pilots off the coast of South Carolina. China claimed it was built for meteorological research. The United States made an ever more evidence-backed claim that it was built for espionage. Within weeks, 3 further UAP were shot down. Because of the challenging locations where they were downed over Alaska, Canada's Yukon Territory, and over Michigan's Lake Huron, gathering physical evidence of their manufacture has been difficult. But the scientific presumption is that all 3 UAP were, in fact, human-made. We cannot know if the U.S. military's sudden public admission of UAP existence was an early acknowledgement, perhaps even a signal to its adversaries, that it was aware some fraction of reported UAP were surveillance technology launched by other nations here on Earth. Evident in subsequent press conferences, however, was confusion. In one instance, it took 2 missiles to destroy a UAP, the first having missed the small object. And at a press briefing on February 13, 2023, White House Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre declared, "I know there have been questions and concerns about this, but there is no indication of aliens or extraterrestrial activity with these recent takedowns, all but begging the profoundly unanswered question, what would such an indication be?" Tipping a hand to its own uncertainty, the Department of Defense signaled it was broadening its scope when it renamed the Airborne Object Identification and Management Group, the All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office. From focusing solely on airborne UAP, the government is signaling that this new office's concern will now encompass unexplained phenomena tracked everywhere: space, air, land, and sea. In less than 2 years, the American government went from outright denying or belittling interest in UFOs to rebranding them as UAP, declaring them a pressing matter of national concern, and occasionally ordering the military to neutralize some of them. How quickly worries about UAP shift from being the isolated focus of one nation's military to a species-wide scientific concern will be one measure of how quickly humanity might ascend the ladder of civilizations. If we are indeed children of the cosmos, what does our behavior suggest to any potential cosmic parent monitoring our activity? And why does the military, rather than pure science, seem to be leading this extraordinary moment? The confusions of February 2023 were hinted at by those of October 2022. I was reminded then that this necessary shift of perspective from narrow nationalist interests to a shared interstellar curiosity will not happen seamlessly. That was when I first experienced reports that Ukrainian astronomers were claiming multiple sightings of dark objects between 3 and 12 meters in size, reaching speeds of 15 kilometers per second and traveling with no optical emissions. I was immediately inundated with emails asking for my thoughts, many pointing out that, if what was being reported were true, the capabilities of these phantom objects vastly exceeded anything human-made aircraft or rockets were capable of. Were Ukrainians perceiving UAP that evidenced an extraterrestrial civilization's interest in terrestrial military conflicts? Most of my replies emphasized what we knew for certain. Ukraine was deeply entrenched in a military conflict with Russia, guaranteeing the introduction of a tremendous amount of noise ordnance, drones, airplanes into the astronomers' data sets. In short, the sheer lack of reliable, validated data made the reported phantoms an unpromising phenomenon for transparent science to address. And so, I largely discounted the reported sightings until a high-level official in the United States government arrived at my front door, urgently asking for my thoughts on them. A few hours later, I authored a paper laying out the scientific reasons the Ukrainian reports were most likely false. If we accept the reported distance and speed of these dark objects, physics and mathematics unequivocally tell us that the friction of any dark object blocking light with the surrounding air would generate a bright optical fireball. If, however, you reduce the object's inferred distance by a factor of 10, then they become fully consistent with the size, speed, and appearance of artillery shells. On reading my article, the Ukrainian astronomers who authored the original report dismissed me as a theorist and maintained their belief that the objects remained mysterious, UAP. Striking a curious note of national pride, they observed, "Our characteristics of the objects are very similar to those of U.S. military pilots and Canadian civilian pilots." Hidden within the brief global interest in phantom UAP, possibly over war-torn Ukraine and the United States, destroying UAP of uncertain origin is, I think, a much larger worry. Humanity runs the risk of spending decades, perhaps generations, confining its interest in extraterrestrial artifacts within historically and locally defined contests among terrestrial nations. It is in this sense that we desperately need a new vocabulary that reflects an interstellar frame for understanding our species' predicament. For example, hidden in the exchanges that followed the Ukrainian report was an unasked but critical question. Why do humans imagine that so advanced and technologically capable extraterrestrial civilizations would choose to send phantom craft to our atmosphere to observe our rather parochial practice of industrial murder? Isn't it far more probable that an advanced ETC would be animated by the broader scientific curiosity the Chinese wanted to claim was the purpose of their balloon? We must similarly ask, why is it that the United States' concern with UAP has always been, and largely still remains, the narrow province of the American military? The Pentagon report was momentous. A wealth of empirical data about UAP was finally acknowledged to exist. More, still classified data very likely exists. That after the first balloon was spotted over the U.S., the North American Aerospace Defense Command, NORAD, stated it had enhanced its radar to pick up smaller objects suggests they had the capability to do so all along. What the nations of the world choose to do with the data they hold, and to which branches of government they entrust those data, goes immediately to the question, what will humanity do with the mounting empirical evidence that UAP exist? How we respond, and with what guiding assumptions, will, I believe, determine for how long we remain a D-class civilization being led by our local history rather than by the universal methods and logics of scientific inquiry. We did not need the Pentagon report, Ukrainian astronomers, or NORAD to tell us that UAP are not science fiction. They are simply science. Explaining the physical world's phenomena is precisely what the scientific method was invented for. The universe, naturally, is full of unexplained and insufficiently explained phenomena. Some remain squarely in the realm of theory dark matter, for just one example. Others, like UAP, are questions answerable through the collection of more and better observational data. What is more, we know that manufactured technology arriving from interstellar space is physically plausible because we have already sent human-manufactured technology into interstellar space. The effort to answer whether another civilization has done likewise, and perhaps with far greater sophistication, quickly presents us with some of the most awesome, enduring questions of human existence. The conclusive, empirical discovery of a vast extent of dark matter previously invisible to us would be deeply significant. It is unlikely, however, to fundamentally alter our understanding of ourselves. By contrast, whatever we discover through the science of extraterrestrial artifacts say that life and civilizations are common throughout the universe, or conversely, that life and civilizations are exceedingly rare, we will nevertheless confront a species and civilization-altering question: what is humanity's place among life in the universe? It is truly frustrating that for decades, humanity has expended far greater amounts of money and intellectual talent in pursuit of a better understanding of, and some empirical evidence for, dark matter than it has in pursuit of extraterrestrial artifacts. But there is a silver lining. There is much to be done that will accumulate evidence touching on the existence of ETC capable of sending UAP to Earth's atmosphere, and some of it can be done with startling speed. Whether or not this scientific work is done quickly depends entirely on how long it takes us to redress how ill-prepared we are to undertake the work of resolving UAP into EAP-explained aerial phenomena. And that will require, I believe, confronting an uncomfortable cultural fact. Like our host planet, our D-class civilization is profoundly immature. In the vast family history of all the stars in the universe, our own sun is a mere toddler. Most stars were born billions of years before the sun. Many are so ancient they have already consumed their nuclear fuel and cooled off to a compact Earth-sized remnant known as a white dwarf. And of the billions of stars in our own Milky Way galaxy, roughly half host an Earth-sized planet residing in the zone that would permit liquid water and the complex chemistry of life. This means that here in the Milky Way alone, the evolutionary dice of life have been rolled in innumerable places under conditions astonishingly similar to those that produced life on Earth and likely much, much earlier in cosmic history. Surely, then, it is entirely reasonable to suspect that life elsewhere not only exists but is quite common, and that in many cases it began long, long before our microbial ancestors got their start here on Earth. If so, then intelligent species may well be billions of years ahead of us in the building of technological civilizations. Furthermore, during the very short time span encompassing recorded human history, entire civilizations, Mesopotamian, Roman, Aztec, have come and gone and now exist only in cultural echoes or through archaeological digs. Scale this analogy to the universe and we can postulate the statistically plausible bet that countless other civilizations have come and gone, some leaving discoverable echoes and artifacts, and that the few civilizations that might persist could be millions, perhaps billions, of years older than our own. If we are surrounded by physical evidence of other civilizations, perhaps even material that could help us leap millennia ahead, what is the true cost of allowing old terrestrial rivalries to keep that knowledge locked away? Because we have already launched our own interstellar craft, we can usefully turn the tables on our own search for evidence of another interstellar civilization. At this moment, Voyagers 1 and 2 are the only craft composing NASA's intentional interstellar mission. These craft were engineered, built, and launched in explicit expectation of their eventual discovery by another sentient intelligence. Imagine, 1,000,000 years from now in a distant galaxy, that NASA's Voyager 1 space probe is eventually diverted by the gravitational pull of a star, where it draws the attention of a species residing on one of the universe's innumerable planets that exist in a star's habitable zone. Voyager 1 is about to fulfill NASA's fondest dreams for it. Remarkably, it has, despite its long interstellar journey, survived largely undamaged since its launch in 1977. Its decahedral bus, a mere 47 centimeters in height and 1.78 meters across, has miraculously weathered its million-year journey intact, and its most visible feature, a 3.66-meter diameter parabolic antenna, is unharmed. Voyager 1 is pulled into a solar system's orbit on a trajectory that has it pass close enough to the species' telescopes that it is detected by the starlight it reflects. And in short order, the data streaming in from their other instruments help them determine Voyager 1's speed, rotation, rough point of origin, heat signature, and clues as to its material composition. Imagining the means by which Voyager 1 might be identified by another technologically adept civilization is less speculative than you might think. Whatever the biology of the species, their observatories would not look fundamentally different from ours. The universe's fixed physical laws effectively serve to put boundaries on the design of devices used to study them and tease out their consequences. There are only a finite number of ways you can build cameras that photograph distant objects and telescopes that perceive infrared wavelengths, just as there are a finite number of ways to generate the electricity necessary to power them. Put differently, all civilizations that confront the same unchanging natural laws and attempt to understand those laws will be constrained by those same laws as they manufacture technology, and they will tend towards certain common understandings, design choices, and conclusions. True, the gap in technological capabilities between civilizations could be so vast that one might perceive the technology of the other with as little comprehension as a chimpanzee experiencing a presentation at an Apple launch event. Humanity, if confronted with a civilization that had the benefit of millions of years' experience and total mastery of all the physical laws, both classical and quantum, would be akin to such a chimpanzee, if not something even less flattering, perhaps a termite. But it is also entirely possible that the technological gap between species could be small enough to make the relationship more that of a student to a patient teacher. Being generous, we might posit such a gap to be roughly 2,000 human history years long. I imagine that the inventor of the Antikythera mechanism, a shoebox-sized device about 2 millennia old that ancient Greeks used to calculate the locations of celestial bodies, on being introduced to an iPhone, might still think of the forces of the natural world in terms of gods and spirits, but would also possess a remotely usable frame of reference, far more than a chimpanzee or a termite. Even a student so disadvantaged could make rapid progress understanding an iPhone, especially with a sufficiently gifted and patient teacher. Enough common knowledge and even a 2,000-year gap is likely bridgeable. Of course, if a species is without sufficient scientific curiosity or is resolutely interested only in its own planetary biology and civilizations, or elects to be incurious about the possibility of other planetary civilizations, then it wouldn't have a clue that a new piece of extraterrestrial space trash had intruded on the orbit of their sun. Voyager 1 would come and go, and they would continue on with their governing myths and, very likely, the presumption of being both the smartest and the only civilized life in the vast expanse of the universe. For the sake of the current thought experiment, we must assume that this hypothetical species in the distant future is scientifically capable and interested in the arrival of even something as small and unassuming as Voyager 1, passing 24 million kilometers, or about the distance Venus is from Earth, from their home planet. Here is my first question. How impressed should we be with the species' scientific and technological prowess? The answer, enviously impressed, but perhaps not for the reason you might initially think. Humanity currently does not possess equipment capable of detecting a probe of that size at that distance. Oumuamua was at a similar distance from Earth, but it had a width and length of hundreds of meters, being most probably pancake-shaped. Its depth was harder to determine and can be left as thin. That's considerably larger than Voyager 1. Roughly a football field compared to a diminutive football player. And while the astronomers operating Pan-STARRS telescopes in 2017 were able to discover this interstellar object, those aiming the infrared Spitzer Space Telescope, designed to peer deep into space rather than at rapidly passing nearer objects, failed to perceive any heat signature. Whether there was none, or the signature was simply below the telescope's detection ability, we do not know. No instrument in humanity's arsenal of cosmic discovery was then built for the explicit purpose of detecting anomalous and potentially extraterrestrial interstellar objects. The species tracking Voyager 1 is far more fortunate, possessing instruments capable of alerting them to the probe's existence. And if this species has telescopes sophisticated enough to perceive Voyager 1 in transit, that strongly suggests they were actively looking for just such an object. In turn, that means the odds are excellent that their civilization also possesses the means to intercept, image, and perhaps even capture Voyager 1. And if all of these presumptions hold, then the species would soon be the possessors of the 12-inch gold-plated copper disc encased in a protective jacket and mounted on the side of Voyager's bus. Soon, the species' scientists, and perhaps its entire planet-wide population, would experience a soundtrack that includes words of welcome in 55 terrestrial languages, diverse recorded sounds, thunder, a human heartbeat, crickets, the liftoff of the Saturn V rocket, a mother kissing her child, and an eclectic collection of music. More importantly, they would possess incontrovertible physical evidence that they are not alone in the universe. Unfortunately, to date, humanity does not have telescopes capable of picking up the existence of an interstellar object the size and distance posited for Voyager 1. And among our rapidly increasing fleet of spacecraft, we still have nothing capable of chasing, intercepting, and photographing, let alone capturing, any such object. This unfortunate reality leads to my second question. How great is the scientific gap between this hypothetical species' civilization and humanity's? In fact, the technological gap is minimal, bordering on non-existent. We possess the core technology to create such instruments. The reason humanity does not currently have them is not a matter of means, but a matter of conscious choice and cultural priority. And this is the real reason we should envy this hypothetical species. Yes, we would have much to learn from a species capable of bringing Voyager back for show and tell in their planetary museums. But the nature of those lessons wouldn't be primarily technological or scientific. They would have far more to do with the relative difference between that species' place on the cosmic ladder of civilizations versus humanity's. Consider that for decades we've known that manufacturing and launching basic interstellar craft is not fundamentally difficult. After all, we achieved it in 1977, sending both Voyagers into space at the reasonable cost of $865 million. That was also the year humans in the millions packed theaters to experience Star Wars, which happened to gross around $775 million. If we can achieve this, another planetary civilization could, and depending on their priorities and, crucially, their longevity, they might have created an interstellar mission able to send out far more than just 2 craft. The simple fact is, the first words that open Star Wars are the only ones that make any of its make-believe even remotely plausible. A long time ago, trailed across the screen before, in a galaxy far, far away. This was a subtle reminder that the Sun formed only 4.6 billion years ago, in the last third of cosmic history. If human civilization manages to persist, if the dawn of our interstellar era is not also its dusk, we will manufacture ships that can chase, image, and even capture a UAP or interstellar object. The reasons we are currently unable to do so is that, as a civilization, we have not prioritized the dedicated, scientific search for extraterrestrial technology. More is at stake, however, than merely missing the momentous discovery that we are not alone. We are currently a D-class civilization, characterized by our short-sighted pursuit of selfish goals at the expense of the long-term survival of our civilization and our planet. If humanity fails to ascend this cosmic scale of civilizations, the odds increase dramatically that we will perish even before the sun does. To jolt us out of our current complacency, humanity needs a sufficiently grand ambition. That ambition, I am convinced, is the scientific and technological pursuit of definitive proof of an ETC. If our greatest challenge is the sheer physics of interstellar travel, or is it our cultural predisposition to choose self-deception over the necessary hard truth that reality demands? The greatest challenge interstellar humanity faces is extending the longevity of its civilization. If we fail at that, every endeavor, scientific or otherwise, is mooted, as is the question, are we alone? Whatever is out there waiting to be discovered requires a discoverer. At a lecture to Harvard alumni, I was asked how long I expected our technological civilization to survive. My answer, based on the statistical average lifespan of human civilizations, is that it is probable that we are in the middle part of our civilization's lifespan. After all, the chance of you waking up on a random morning as an infant on its first day after birth is tens of thousand times smaller than the chance of you waking up as an adult somewhere toward the middle of your life. Just as it is unlikely that we are in the infancy of humanity, it is equally unlikely that our modern technological era is going to last millions of years beyond the present. The more statistically probable case is that we are currently in the adulthood phase of our technological lifespan. This means we should expect human civilization to survive a few centuries more, but not much longer. This outcome is already suggested by our species' ability to inflict calamities in the form of climate change, nuclear explosions, or pandemics that previously were reserved to nature. This forecast is horrifying to contemplate. But is our statistically probable destiny inevitable? Here's a reason to be hopeful. We hold increasing control over what promises to most influence our civilization's destiny. While nature heavily influences an individual lifespan, technology heavily influences a civilization's. Statistical forecasts could be altered if a previously unaccounted for factor comes into play. Artificial intelligence is one such factor, though to understand why, you first need to set aside nearly everything you've learned about sentient computers in science fiction films, starting from, at least, 2001, A Space Odyssey. A more promising cinematic guide is the iconic closing scene of the remarkable 1991 film Thelma and Louise, two women hounded by, and in this scene literally chased by, an oppressive, opportunity-squelching civilization elect to drive headlong off a cliff to their certain deaths. Since the movie debuted, viewers and critics have imagined different endings. Most involve the title characters, Thelma and Louise, turning the steering wheel away from the cliff's edge at the last moment. Like the movie's actors, Gina Davis and Susan Sarandon, their characters lived to fight another day. By 2022, we can conjure a different, and for human civilization, more apt ending. The prevalence of driver-assist systems in cars suggests that another way to avoid the catastrophe is to imagine the car's autonomous emergency brakes engaging as Thelma and Louise approach the cliff. In fact, there's no need to imagine it. Many automobile manufacturers now include automatic braking assist systems. The consequences promise to be profound. According to one study by the National Safety Council, advanced driver assistance technologies have the potential to prevent 20,841 deaths per year, or about 62% of total traffic deaths. Lane keeping assist accounts for 14,844 of this savings, while pedestrian automatic braking accounts for another 4,106 lives saved. Most often, the news reports the other side of this real-time technological selection story. In June 2022, for example, the United States National Highway Traffic Safety Administration reported that over a 10-month period, there were nearly 400 crashes with cars operating with their partially automated driver assist systems turned on. 5 fatalities and 3 serious injuries were consequences. But, as one op-ed noted, the problem was in part traceable to the fact that driver assist systems were being used and advertised as fully autonomous systems. Though there are far fewer of them on the road, fully autonomous vehicles such as Waymo, the automobile manufacturer spun off from Google, suffered fewer crashes, and those usually when these cars were struck from behind. Artificial intelligence is already saving lives. It promises to be able to save many more. This is a compelling reason for humanity to be hopeful. Not only should we now imagine an automatic safety system saving Thelma and Louise from themselves, but also preserving the car, a non-trivial consideration as ghosts in the machine start to peek out from between human coding. I am increasingly convinced that our hope increases the more we learn to lean on AI as an essential component of interstellar civilization assist technologies. A reason I prefer Thelma and Louise as the cultural frame for considering our technological future is its ability to force our focus on interstellar humanity's greater concern, the damning legacy practices of our culture. The history of science-led technology is one of almost persistent improvement. The history of human civilization's ability, even eagerness, to oppress some and squelch the opportunities of many millions is almost as consistent. Indeed, the number of times our insights into the laws of nature have turned hurtful to humans is traceable to our civilization's antiquated cultural practices. The hopeful side of statistics, the optimistic side of technological selection, anticipates solutions. The pessimistic side of statistics, where humanity's odds of interstellar survival get ever longer, happens when individuals are silenced and new ideas are squelched. For centuries, our civilization suppressed the contributions of an entire gender. We mustn't repeat that error. Rather, the rapidly approaching moment when we will not be confident if a chatbot is displaying complex algorithms or consciousness encourages us to start now to broaden the definition of interstellar humanity. A hope for humanity is to imagine that, within a few centuries, our destiny will be significantly informed and pursued in collaboration with artificial rather than exclusively natural intelligence. Without such assistance, the odds of us driving our civilization off a cliff increases. With the benefit of civilization assist systems, that probability goes down, and with the support of fully autonomous systems, something new, and perhaps far more hopeful becomes possible. Technological selection clears the way for humanity's survival, free of dependence on natural selection. In this context, the limited horizon of our current technological civilization implies a future in which, instead of going extinct, our technological creations will save us and, once they are conscious, them from ourselves. This would constitute, both literally and metaphorically, not a ghost in the machine, but a deus ex machinas, the Latin loan translation from Greek that means a god from the machine. This phrase describes a plot device, whereby a seemingly unsolvable problem is suddenly resolved by an unexpected event. The term was coined from ancient Greek theater, where actors playing gods were brought on stage, usually descending from above, using a crane-like machine. The optimistic lesson to take from the Google engineer Blake Lemoine imagining that he encountered a childlike consciousness when interacting with the artificially intelligent chatbot generator, Lambda, is the same we might take from the traffic safety report. Not only is additional help on the near-term horizon, but the nascent AI systems we already have in place would be sufficient to preserve real-life Thelmas and Louises. And, just maybe, the AI about to lend us assistance could be sufficient to address many, even all, of the dysfunctions that set the fictional Thelma and Louise on their suicidal course. When we are troubled by practices of the past, the best path forward is to focus on creating a better future. Otherwise, our past is allowed to lock our future into a self-fulfilling prophecy. Some of the worst practices of humans are legacy practices, which maintain their hold on us because simply to admit their faults is to acknowledge our own flaws, false faiths, and hypocrisies. Technological advances, however, can nudge us in good directions. After all, in 1913, 33.38 people died for every 10,000 automobiles on the road, compared to 1.53 in 2020. Somewhere in that dramatic drop was the introduction of advanced driver assist systems, beginning with anti-lock brakes first offered in the 1950s. My friend and colleague, the brilliant astrophysicist Stephen Hawking, was circumspect about AI saving us. He allowed it to be a potential flip-of-a-coin possibility. The rise of powerful AI will either be the best or the worst thing ever to happen to humanity. We do not yet know which, he said in 2016 at the launch of the Leverhulme Center for the Future of Intelligence in Cambridge, England. As Professor Hawking ticked through the pros and cons, with AI possibly undoing some of the damage industrialization inflicted on the environment, being offset by threats of powerful autonomous weapons, or new ways for the few to oppress the many, I heard him placing our civilization on a balance beam. I also understood him to be judging humanity first, AI only secondarily. Most of our history, he allowed, is the history of stupidity. This despite the fact that everything that our civilization has achieved is a product of human intelligence. Ahead, he predicted, was an era of trial and error as humanity brings into being AI that, on the one hand, might help us eradicate disease and poverty, or, on the other, become a competing sentience. To those concerned that AI's arrival augurs humanity's annihilation, I urge optimism. So far, it hasn't been a technology's arrival that presented the threat, but rather humanity's use of it. The philosopher Nick Bostrom has popularized the idea of the doomsday argument, which imagines that every time humans reach into the black box of technological invention, there is a chance they will come out with a planet-destroying technology. For me, and with the pursuit of extraterrestrial technology and grasping the next run up the cosmic ladder of civilizations in mind, this raises two useful considerations. One, perhaps it is time to look for, and encourage through machine learning, discoveries made by non-human hands. Two, it is more likely that any extraterrestrial AI we encounter will be helpful rather than harmful. This is because civilizations ascend by virtue of ever-increasing intelligence. In Hawking's comments, I perceive a truism that borders on an article of faith. Human civilization evinces that the long arc of its history bends toward intelligence. That is likely to be all the more true for a civilization tens of thousands or millions of years older than ours. I also believe that it is the civilizations bunched at the bottom rungs of the ladder that remain enthralled with destruction. Here, again, much science fiction misdirects our concerns. The pinnacle of sci-fi villainy is often presented as evil in control of powers sufficient to destroy planets. To an intelligence a few million years old, this attainment would be a banality. Adjusting your chronological frame to the life of the universe and the destruction of a single planet is as uninteresting and as predictable as the family car reaching the end of its practical usefulness. When this happens, with luck and some deliberative effort, you are in a position to trade it in for the safer, more economical, and ecologically sounder model. The same would hold true for civilizations that have reached the B-class level. It isn't that a D-class civilization or a C-class civilization might not find itself in need of a newer, better planet. Rather, it is the case that their civilization stalled at a point that foreclosed that possibility. D-class civilizations don't trade up, they wink out of existence. Similarly, it matters if you bought your first family car in 1920, 1950, or 2020. Just bringing to mind the options available to a first-time buyer in each decade helps make concrete how technological selection influences us over time. Humanity is already the great beneficiary of such selection, and my daughters, the older being able to drive in Massachusetts as of now, will enjoy the consequences without having to give that fact a thought. This, too, is the optimistic side of statistics. Every generation has confronted unexpected factors, just as all humanity confronts unacknowledged factors. As we become increasingly technologically adept, however, factors that will prove determining of our survival will be gifts of sentience, not nature. Half a millennium ago, Nicolaus Copernicus forever gifted humans with the mediocrity principle. We are not at the center of anything, whether that be the universe or the grand narrative of its unfolding. As an interstellar species, we can grasp that the Copernican principle is universally true. All sentience throughout the universe is equally mediocre before the physical laws that govern everywhere equally and without prejudice. The search for intention in the universe, especially any intention that uniquely privileges humanity, is an effort of narcissistic astronomers or humans pondering the cosmos with one eye on a mirror. The only intentions discoverable by an interstellar civilization will be those that sentience has created. Humanity's exclusive terrestrial existence has encouraged us to routinely fall into one particular well of stupidity, endowing the natural selection that directs life's evolution on Earth with intentionality. There is lots of evidence that the mechanism of life as we know it is accidentally opportunistic. There is no evidence that it is deliberative. For sentient intelligence, the opposite is true. The balance of stupidity and intelligence that characterizes our civilization is ever more the result of our deliberative effort rather than accidents of circumstance. Put differently, natural selection had a great deal to do with your body and mind, with its particular genetic predispositions for certain abilities and ailments, and its prospects for living robustly for a certain number of decades. But natural selection had very little to do with your choice of the car you drive. Therein lies a distinction that helps identify a likely universal truth of all sentient intelligence over the course of time, especially measured in millennia. Natural selection gives ground to technological selection. Your ability to vastly improve the qualities of the car you drive is going to happen faster and more predictably than your ability to extend your life by centuries. Technological selection holds out the promise of wresting humanity's future from the intentions of deities, the determinism of natural laws, and the pointless unfolding of the relentlessly accidental. Since the advent of consciousness and tool-making, humanity has been in an incremental, generation-over-generation race against conceding causation to one or all of these. Just when this began as a guess, I put it at about 100,000 years ago, which is when researchers find evidence of tools for the explicit purpose of making clothes. Warmth, protection, and comfort were likely the driving reasons rather than modesty. But more than fire, club, or wheel, a garment to cover yourself seems an unambiguous melding of consciousness and technology. From that moment to the rising importance of quantum computing, technological selection has been a thumb on the scale of natural selection. That weight has increased steadily. A consequence is that we can survey the past 10,000 years of human history and perceive technology's thumbprints all along our civilization's trajectory. Whether on balance we consider the cumulative effects to be positive or negative, the effects are indisputable. Another consequence is that over past decades, technology has allowed us to be increasingly respectful of the far, far longer period during which from Earth we can perceive no such thumbprints. Human civilization's causal debts run back well past Homo sapiens using bones to work animal skins into clothing. Despite what our history books recount about the past, human civilization owes its existence to three unsung heroes from the early beginning of the universe. First and foremost is dark matter. Since Fritz Zwicky realized in 1933 that most of the matter in the universe does not interact with light, we've learned that this allowed dark matter to maintain the fossil inhomogeneities left over from the early universe. 400,000 years after the Big Bang, ordinary matter damped its primordial inhomogeneities by diffusion of light. If there was no dark matter, galaxies like the Milky Way would have never formed because the primordial perturbations, or slightly 1 part in 100,000 more dense pockets of matter that seeded them would have been damped. Dark matter had maintained memory of these seed inhomogeneities and allowed them to grow into galaxies because the dark matter was not influenced by light. Without dark matter, the primordial seeds would have been erased, and galaxies, stars, planets, and the chemistry of life as we know it would not exist. In short, no dark matter, no us. And precisely because we still do not know what dark matter is, nor even have we conclusively proven it exists, this particular unsung hero resembles an anonymous lifesaver who enabled our existence, but to whom we cannot express our gratitude. Long before dark matter came to our rescue, there was the existence of a slight excess of ordinary matter over antimatter. Had there been perfect symmetry between matter and antimatter, the two would have annihilated each other, resulting in pure radiation. Another result, we would have never existed. The process that triggered the surplus of matter over antimatter at the minuscule fraction of 1 part in a billion is unknown. Once again, we owe our existence to another unsung hero in our distant, distant past. The big picture is straightforward enough. Our universe started from a very simple state and became more complex over time as a result of gravitational instability that assembled matter into bound objects. When I started my career in astrophysics, it was argued that cosmological models only start from a simple initial state because of the scarcity of observational data. Simple states, like objects at rest, tend to remain simple rather than give rise to the complexity of, well, everything. Yet 4 decades later, we now have many more data, and we confirm that the initial state was indeed simple. What is more, if the initial state had been chaotic, habitable conditions for life as we know it would not have arisen. But why were these initial conditions selected over a disorganized initial state? When I experience the rooms of my daughters, I find them to be among the most disorganized places possible. I comfort myself with statistics. Given that there are many more disorganized states than organized ones, I shouldn't be surprised. So, to what should we give thanks for organizing the early conditions of our universe? Cosmic inflation is often credited, but its promoters assume that it arose from a special initial state rather than deriving it. For the third time, we owe our existence to an unsung hero. In an arresting passage in the opening paragraphs of Look Homeward, Angel, the novelist Thomas Wolfe wrote, "Each of us is all the sums he has not counted. Subtract us into nakedness and night again, and you will see begin in Crete, 4,000 years ago, the love that ended yesterday in Texas. Each moment is the fruit of 40,000 years. The minute-winning days, like flies, buzz home to death, and every moment is a window on all time. The sentiment is right, though the time frame wrong. Each moment in human civilization is the fruit of 13.8 billion years, and each choice we make a window on all that time." I once attended a forum at which a speaker commented that he plans his life so that the speech delivered at his funeral enumerating his accomplishments will be to his liking. As a guiding principle for how to live a life, this makes little sense. It is not just that when I die, I will not care what other people say about me. This seems a banal truism for the dead. Rather, it is the case that I do not care what they say about me while I am alive. My reasons are the same. As I breathe, I have little to no control over who assesses my efforts, let alone my achievements. Once I stop breathing, what little control I now possess ends. My first mentor in astrophysics, for example, had a professional rival, and when my mentor died, it was his rival that was asked to write his obituary in a prestigious journal. This lesson can be generalized more broadly. When individuals wish to document their accomplishments, they almost always do so through means that will be appreciated for a finite time, and a far more limited amount of it than is imagined. When I perceive University Hall at Harvard University, I find statues and paintings of distinguished public figures who wish to document their physical appearance, so that future generations would appreciate the prominent status they had attained. Not only are such means of documentation primitive by our current standards, when some kids walk past immobile statuary and two-dimensional paintings, they do not even yawn without reading the labels. Rather, their heads rarely rise high enough to lift their line of sight from their mobile devices. All humans live and die within billionths of cosmic history, so why pretend that what we accomplish in so infinitesimal a span of time warrants commemoration? Letting go of that preoccupation allows us to appreciate questions whose answers could possibly be at a scale deserving notice. How does humanity wish to be remembered on the cosmic scene? As a prejudiced civilization that spent its time in rivalries among ego-driven experts, or as an unpresuming culture that sought knowledge based on new evidence from interstellar space? These polls allow us to answer a different question. What can humanity do to reach the next, and the next, rungs up the ladder of cosmic civilizations? My advice to young scientists who seek a sense of purpose in their research is to engage in a topic that matters to society. It could be moderating climate change, developing streamlined vaccines to pandemics, satisfying our energy or food needs, establishing a sustainable base in space, or finding technological relics of alien civilizations. Advances in any of these areas, let alone all, amplify the possibility for progress along every metric of our civilization. In addition, these are areas that much of society wants science to devote its efforts toward. And, given that, broadly speaking, society funds science, scientists should reciprocate by attending to the public's interests. Lurking in the background of this prescription for young scientists is a silver lining to humanity's future. It involves the possibility that we possess free will. A rich philosophical literature, most recently augmented by neuroscience and consciousness studies, continues to chip away at this so far insoluble question. And physics is not absent from the debate. After all, the Standard Model presumes that we are all made of elementary particles with no additional constituents. As such composite systems, we do not possess freedom at a fundamental level because all particles and their interactions follow fixed laws. What we interpret as free will, then, merely encapsulates such complex uncertainties associated with human interactions that humans, gifted limited cognition, evade a sense of predictability at the personal level. But this would leave the destiny of our civilization inevitable in an ironclad statistical sense. I am not of that opinion. I find the belief in some, as of yet not fully understood fact of our physical laws that leave space for future determining free will plausible and necessary. But even if we reduce that space to zero, we confront only the greater need of data. Humans without the gift of free will are by default actuaries. Whether or not you will die in a car crash may be determined, but the likelihood of it happening has statistically decreased from 1913 to 2020, and this is true no matter the make and model of the car your fixed life course places you in. By the same statistical science, or the law of large numbers, the United States government is able to publish a period life table setting the death probability in 2019 of a 1-year-old at 0.000425 and the death probability of a 100-year-old at 0.348128. The forecast of how much time we have left in our technological future could then follow from statistical information about the fate of civilizations like ours that predated us and lived under similar physical constraints. Most stars formed billions of years before the Sun and may have fostered technological civilizations on their habitable planets that perished by now. If we had historical data on the lifespan of a large number of them, we could calculate the likelihood of our civilization surviving for different periods of time. But allow a modest place for free will and, once confronted with the probability distribution for survival, the human spirit may choose to defy all odds and behave as a statistical outlier. Just as you may decide to buy a car with driver assist technology and treat it as assistance rather than fully automated AI, human civilization could decide to rest ever more heavily on the benefits of technological selection. For example, humanity's chance for survival would improve if some people chose to exist away from Earth. Venturing into space offers the advantage of preserving our civilization from a single-planet disaster. Although Earth serves as a comfortable home at the moment, we will ultimately be forced to relocate because the sun will boil off all liquid water on our planet's surface within 1 billion years. Establishing multiple communities of humans on other worlds would resemble the duplication of the Bible by the Gutenberg printing press around 1455. Just as that prevented the loss of precious content through a single-point catastrophe, so would the dispersion of human civilization throughout the cosmos. Of course, even the short travel distance from Earth to Mars raises major health hazards from cosmic rays, energetic solar particles, UV radiation, lack of a breathable atmosphere, and low gravity. But overcoming the challenges of settling on Mars will also improve our ability to recognize terraformed planets around other stars based on our own experience. Some argue that we have enough problems at home, and that we should not waste valuable time and money on space ventures that are not devoted to our most urgent needs right here on host planet Earth. Surrendering to this premise is self-defeating. We should recognize that attending strictly to mundane goals will not provide us with the broader skill set necessary to adapt to changing circumstances, and a narrow focus on only our immediate irritants would resemble historical obsessions that ended up irrelevant, like how to remove the increasing volumes of horse manure from city streets before the automobile was invented, or how to construct a global grid of telephone lines before the cell phone was invented. Of course, we must focus our immediate attention on immediate existential problems, but this must be for the purpose of cultivating the inspiration that elevates our perspective to grander achievements and new horizons. Only narrowing our field of view drives us to conflicts because it amplifies our differences and limited resources. We must also cultivate a broader perspective that fosters cooperation in response to global challenges. And there is no better fit for such a perspective than science, the infinite sum game that can extend the lifespan of humanity. At no point in human history has any considerable fraction of society found solace in the choice of Thelma and Louise. When cataloging humanity's traits, whether or not what falls under unflattering outnumbers what falls under flattering is an exercise poorly suited to the scientist. That perseverance is among those traits is requisite for the achievements of science. We have spent centuries during which pockets of our scientific enterprise were convinced that new means of destroying some humans was necessary for other humans to flourish. That idiocy continues as I type. There is no reason it needs to, rather, there is a reason to believe it will exhaust itself and cause for hope in our incremental, step-by-step, at the fastest pace we can sustain. Expansion of human civilization into space. Currently, this is most likely to happen by proxies. The recent approach taken by the Mars 2020 mission is to operate robotic devices, such as the Perseverance rover and the helicopter Ingenuity, under the control of humans of NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory. A robot is a physical representation of its remote operators, namely an avatar. This concept is borrowed from Hinduism, in which, translating from Sanskrit, it literally means descend, signifying the material appearance of God on Earth. NASA's mission is narrowly defined so that the operators of its robots have limited ability to maneuver them to reflect their personal preferences. But cheaper commercial robots planted on the Moon or Mars could potentially serve as avatars that follow the free will of their Earth-bound owners. Already under consideration, such technology would allow for trips to remote locations on the planets of the solar system in a rough analogy with the early explorers who surveyed exotic destinations on Earth. Just as Spain's King Ferdinand and Queen Isabella financed Christopher Columbus, so too could wealthy individuals on Earth fund the exploration of the surfaces of celestial bodies. Except that the use of robots reduces, of course, the immense cost and risk associated with sending individuals across uncharted seas or, for that matter, as space tourists to inhospitable planets. A more sophisticated strategy is to develop AI systems that will operate autonomously after an early training phase on Earth. The resulting AI astronauts will carry selected traits of our civilization into space without requiring remote control, as if they were independent kids no longer in need of supervision from helicopter parents. These mature AI astronauts could embark on long trips to other stars across the Milky Way galaxy, where communication delays could render guidance from Earth impractical. All such possibilities require humanity to bend technological selection to wiser, more prudent, more hopeful outcomes. The hopeful news is that over millennia, technological selection in the name of survival of the fittest has become more common. The alarming news is that there is no guarantee that this will continue. From stone tools found in a cave to the mobile phone in your hand, a 1,000-year thread of slow, plodding advancement is visible. On occasion, a singular event or person propels us forward by a great leap. Many declare 1905 to be such a year, for it witnessed Albert Einstein publishing the 4 papers that resulted in his special theory of relativity. But on other occasions, we lose ground measurable in generations, from the Dark Ages, between the fall of Rome and the advent of the Enlightenment, to the charnel house decades of the 20th century. Only the least civilized among us can imagine human productivity was increased by the murder of tens of millions. The resonance of Thelma and Louise's is that only ego allows us to miss the obvious lesson. Human civilization rides shotgun in their speeding car. Within the confines of the movie, the message was a dysfunctional society and culture closed off all choices for Thelma and Louise. The concern is something similar might await human civilization, the ever-narrowing of choices. For us, perhaps civilization-assist technology can offer hope, even a solution by way of a slew of not-yet-visible choices. Human civilization has reliably developed such technology on a deliberative, incremental basis. Personally, I guide my life so as to have an opportunity to press a button on extraterrestrial technological equipment. And if that wish cannot be granted, to scoop fragments of an interstellar meteor off the ocean floor near Papua New Guinea and discover whether it is made of an artificial metal alloy that nature rarely puts together on its own without the intervention of intelligence. Perhaps the civilization-assist technology we will most benefit from will not be of human manufacture after all. It is our responsibility, as human beings, to work together and build a civilization wise enough to outlive its own youthful errors. If we accomplish this, abandon war as a means to resolve disputes, confront novel viruses as a species, remedy planet-wide warming, we can buy ourselves time and opportunity to prepare, and even forestall a single-point catastrophe that could wipe us out in a single stroke. We need time to plan and launch terrestrial life and human culture beyond the confines of a single planet, a single solar system, even a single galaxy. We must work to ensure life on Earth continues to exist, in the knowledge of the certainty that one day Earth no longer will. In the Bible, Noah's Ark saved life from the deluge. A scientific ark will be necessary to save it from the unavoidable death of the sun. With that in mind, could there really be anything more practical and urgent for our civilization to do than take precautions that will someday save life from extinction? Currently, all our eggs are in one basket, the Earth. A future incarnation of Noah's Ark would lift off the surface of Earth, sail into space, and carry humanity and our civilization with it. This must be the hope of all optimists. Personally, there is no doubt in my mind that space is our ultimate destiny, because conditions will inevitably deteriorate on Earth, either quickly or more slowly. If you are optimistic about survival, space is our only option. The biblical story details an ark with dimensions of 150 meters by 25 meters by 15 meters. Coincidentally, these measurements are similar but with no meaningful relation inferred to those of Oumuamua. Of course, we know the Old Testament story to be a fable. Oumuamua is no fable, but it was beyond our capacity to study it clearly, and we will never know its precise nature or composition. Like fables, what it might have been can still inspire us. Three converging possibilities will determine the fate of human civilization: the pace of scientific discovery, the pace of space exploration, the pace of technological advance. Together, they define our ability to grasp the next rung of the cosmic ladder of civilizations and ensure that some of us, or something of us, persists off Earth. What is uncertain is how much time we have before catastrophe or catastrophes halt, reverse, or end humanity's progress. There is tension between the ability of a civilization to develop ambitions in space exploration and its ability to inflict existential risks on its planet. Many of the same technological innovations that advance the former can develop in ways that increase the latter, which is all the more reason to actively seek artifacts left by civilizations that have succeeded in extending themselves into the universe. Civilizations that do not venture to space will be far harder to find because their relics will remain bound to their parent planet, and even if we manage to land craft on the home planet of an alien civilization, it's likely they will no longer exist, and their artifacts will have gotten mixed with their host planet's interior as a result of geological activities over billions of years. Civilizations that do venture off their host planets, that do venture out into their galaxy, will most likely have done so with the same ambitions we have: science, knowledge, and survival. If other such civilizations predate us, we can reasonably presume that they also encountered the same choices we now confront, and given the practicalities of physics, matter, and biology, reached similar conclusions. What we are contemplating, in other words, can help us refine the assumptions of the sorts of relics we are seeking. We could choose to build a massive craft with sufficient size and means of supporting life, such that it could follow Noah's example and carry specimens representing all terrestrial life existing as of 2022. But there is no compelling reason to do so. We could also choose to build smaller craft with sufficient means of supporting a small fraction of terrestrial life existing as of 2022. But there are not compelling reasons to do this either. Thanks to modern science and technology, We are within a generation of being able to conceive of a small craft, a CubeSat, or miniature satellite containing an advanced computer system with artificial intelligence that stores the complete DNA information of all species existing on Earth as of 2022. Supplement it with a three-dimensional printer that can harvest the raw materials of the universe to manufacture the seeds of life when auspicious to do so. And not only have we vastly reduced the size of the ark, we have developed the means to send out thousands, millions of them. CubeSat arks could be patient. Each could park at a promising location, whether on an exoplanet or near an evolving star. With sufficient solar heat to keep an ark powered and if surrounded by the raw materials for the chemistry of life, it could turn on at the right time and commence its godlike work. Building an effective ark for our civilization will be much easier with some help. Given unbounded time, we are guaranteed to discover evidence of an interstellar civilization. Either we find its artifacts or we populate the universe with our own. Discovering such evidence, particularly in the form of an extraterrestrial gadget, makes achieving the latter, humanity's successful dispersal throughout the universe, exponentially more likely. It buys us time, benefiting from experience of others, especially if we are able to reverse engineer a vastly more advanced technology than, at our own halting pace of progress, we manage to invent. It must be admitted that even without extraterrestrial assistance, there are reasons for hope. Humanity is capable of great leaps forward, though, of course, how great any such leaps are can only be measured by earthly metrics. But our longevity is far from unbounded. Before her death in January 2023, Lucille Randon, a Catholic nun in France who was born 118 years earlier, was the oldest person alive. Arriving on February 11, 1904, she first drew breath just before relativity and quantum mechanics were discovered. Both are now ubiquitous in technologies integral to numerous space explorations and our civilization's technological advance. For just one example, quantum mechanics is the foundation for our communication devices, and general relativity is needed to allow the precision of GPS systems for navigation. It is sobering, however, to realize that our current notions of space and time are younger than the oldest person alive, and somehow intoxicating. Will these notions be revised in as fundamentally revolutionary ways over the next 118 years? What will today's newly born babies take for granted 118 years hence? Our leaps forward are always achieved by overcoming countervailing human drag. Consider the physicist Albert Michelson. Lucille Randon was 27 when Michelson died in 1931. Decades earlier, he was an eminent physicist who, in the late 19th century, helped establish the speed of light and whose famous experiment, conducted with Edward Morley, refuted the existence of ether, the hypothesized medium for the propagation of light. He is less well remembered for declaring, in 1894, at the dedication of the Ryerson Physical Laboratory at the University of Chicago, that the great physical principles had already been discovered. The future truths of physical science, he stated with confidence, are to be looked for in the sixth place of decimals. This is the default attitude of most experts who wish to maintain their professional status by holding on to past knowledge, which constitutes the foundation for their prestige. It is pride in the past rather than the humility of expressing the hope that everything we currently know now and hold as reflecting the outer limits of human knowledge becomes, in a century, the stuff of middle school textbooks, if not embarrassment. There are many reasons to adopt this attitude, including, of course, the fact that Michelson lived long enough to recall his 1894 statement with chagrin. Gatekeeping experts are not the only source of drag. Perhaps even more concerning is the human habit of egotistical futility. Consider that our first effort at an ark for human life was its opposite. It was a near pointless mausoleum. The New Horizons spacecraft, launched in January 2006 and bound first to Pluto and then 1 billion miles beyond Neptune and into the Kuiper Belt, contained, along with its scientific instruments, a small box carrying 30 grams of Clyde Tombaugh's cremains. Tombaugh discovered Pluto, so in the eyes of some, this was a fitting tribute, not in mine. The contents of the average ashtray would have contained an equivalent amount of information about Tombaugh, humanity, and life on Earth. When I asked the principal investigator of New Horizons why NASA did not send a stem cell from Tombaugh's body, he replied, "This would have been a bureaucratic nightmare." Bureaucratically imposed limits to exploration and knowledge in the understanding that previous generations' discoveries or faiths reflect the limits of intelligence and propriety could doom us to extinction. From a vantage point of presumptive humility, however, there are reasons for increased optimism. That my life's scientific work might represent the zenith of human achievement is cause for profound depression. There is so much to be done. We still do not have a unique, experimentally verified theory that unifies general relativity and quantum mechanics, the two pillars of modern physics. Decades after a quantum gravity theory will be discovered, there might be job advertisements for engineers who use it to build vehicles that would carry humans to the stars faster than imagined before. We also do not know whether the primary cosmic constituents of dark energy and dark matter, or any relation they have to quantum gravity, can be used for propulsion. Decades after we have answers, perhaps it becomes baseline knowledge of the average spacecraft repair shop. When facing a closed gate, we might naively assume that opening it is a major challenge. Worse, we might conclude that it is no gate at all, but a solid, impregnable wall. But, in fact, overcoming this challenge only requires a simple key. And just as it is now utterly immaterial who first carved a tool for preparing clothes, who first adhered to the iron law of data in the advance of science, who first manufactured steam-powered and internal combustion engines, who unraveled the facts of DNA and every other advance that propelled our civilization upward, generations from now it will not matter who or what devised the key that opens the next series of closed gates. Relying exclusively on human efforts to advance toward a new key that would unlock a better understanding of reality could take a while, due to the lack of experimental data that would guide us. Quantum gravity played an important role at the Big Bang and inside black holes, but these environments are not easily accessible experimentally, to put it mildly. Of course, there is another path forward. We can gain a giant leap into our future of scientific knowledge by finding extraterrestrial gadgets that reveal what other civilizations may have accomplished over many more centuries of scientific inquiry. When trying to pass through a door, who manufactured the key human or extraterrestrial matters far, far less than whether that key fits the lock. Unfortunately, astrophysicists tend to roll their eyes when they hear one of their own articulate the aspiration of seeking extraterrestrial help. The most kindly disposed might concede this is possible, but only in a galaxy far, far away. Rather, it will be said, our better bet is finding ancient or current evidence of simple microbial life nearby. This attitude seems deferential to yesterday's intelligence and sense of propriety. I think it has the fact exactly backward. Consider just what it is we're seeking. The chance of finding a civilization that is exactly our technological equal is small, roughly 1 part in 100 million. The ratio between Lucille Rondon's age and the age of the oldest stars in the Milky Way. Most likely, we will find civilizations that are either far behind or far ahead of our scientific knowledge. When envisioning far behind, don't conjure a steampunk world or a Jurassic Park planet, but one representing the period in Earth's history when simple cellular organisms, prokaryotes, comprised the planet's primordial soup. Recall that multicellular animals appeared on Earth only in the last third of terrestrial life's history. Similarly, when envisioning far ahead, don't conjure a colonized solar system, but a civilization for which time and space are as easily manipulated as all matter, dark or otherwise. To find the civilizations far behind our own, we will need to visit the oceans of exoplanets, natural environments similar to those occupied by prokaryotes, and, if we're statistically lucky, primitive human cultures such as those that existed on Earth over most of the past million years. Even to do so with patient CubeSat arcs will require a huge amount of effort and time given our current propulsion technologies. Chemical rockets take at least 40,000 years to reach the nearest star system, Alpha Centauri, which is 4 light-years away. Their speed is 10,000 times slower than the speed of light. But even harnessing light to propel craft at a quarter or half its speed, as anticipated by the Breakthrough Starshot initiative, so that we gather data of more primitive life on distant exoplanets, would yield mostly insights into paths terrestrial life did not take. We are in far greater need of insights into paths we still might. Not only would extraterrestrial relics left by a far more advanced civilization offer us more immediate benefits, but finding them will be less time and energy-consuming. If the most advanced scientific civilizations started their scientific endeavor billions of years ago, we might not need to go anywhere because their equipment may have already arrived in our cosmic neighborhood in the form of interstellar objects or meteors. In that case, all we need to do is become more scientifically rigorous and curious observers, like those members of the Galileo Project who assembled and debugged the project's first telescope system on the roof of the Harvard College Observatory. In contrast to Mickelson's attitude, I am optimistic that the new generation of students will be far more accomplished than the senior faculty who mentor them. And they, in their turn, will actively work to ensure the generation of scholars following them are positioned to eclipse the older generations. The only way we can make progress is by acknowledging our ignorance and being open-minded to learn from observations, and to accept assistance, no matter its origins. In academia, this happens when another scholar enjoys a eureka discovery that invalidates previously held theories. Sometimes, however, assistance is more akin to deus ex machina. Humans stumble across the inexplicable that nevertheless proves essential to propelling us forward. Among astrophysicists and cosmologists, this is the sort of hoped-for event that can call forth derision. It sounds too much like those science fiction stories of men or objects falling to Earth or Moon that on discovery elude our best minds, but manage to advance terrestrial life forward in previously unthinkable grand leaps. Never going to happen, the skeptical declare. To those still stuck on the stigma of little green men, I urge consideration of mitochondria. I urge consideration of the possibility that it already, at least once, happened. Over the past century and a half, the biological sciences have unraveled a great many mysteries. One that remains is eukaryogenesis. For about 2 billion years, prokaryotes, or single-cell organisms akin to bacteria, represented all of the life on Earth. Then suddenly, eureka! Out of that prokaryote soup, eukaryotic cells emerged. These contained nuclei and organelles, all housed within a membrane. They gave rise to fungi, plants, and animals, including us. In most eukaryotic cells, we find mitochondria. But there is evidence that all eukaryotic cells possessed mitochondria at one point, with some losing them along the way. What we know: mitochondria are the power source of eukaryote cells, vastly increasing available energy. What we do not know: where mitochondria arose or the selection process that set eukaryote cells on their trajectory of dominance on Earth. There is a rich scientific literature of competing hypotheses as to mitochondria's origins, but their consequences for eukaryotic cells is common knowledge. They vastly increase the energy available to the cell. Mitochondria serve as the sites of respiration and the production of ATP, a nucleotide that provides the cell with its main source of energy. And most mitochondria retain their own genomes, independent of their host cell's DNA. Why remains a matter of scientific conjecture, a problem in need of data. But among the most promising and controversial is endosymbiosis, or the union of two cells, one inside the interior of the other, that leads to the emergence of novel lineages. Articulated in the 19th century, endosymbiosis was revived by the evolutionary biologist Lynn Margulis, who offered a synthesis of cellular, biochemical, and paleontological evidence that accorded endosymbiosis a central role in shaping evolution on Earth. Despite her seminal paper being rejected by dozens of journals, sometimes expressed with vitriol, in 2002 Discover magazine acknowledged her as among the 50 most influential women in science. The response to Margulis's work, represents yet another example of the scientific community's reluctance to engage a revolutionary hypothesis. That in 2014, a meticulous historical and scientific overview of endosymbiosis strongly suggested that her hypothesis is correct. And endosymbiosis indeed played a vital function in the inception of eukaryogenesis matters. That in terrestrial life's long history, there is an example of cellular life symbiotically incorporating an energy source vastly superior to what its prokaryote ancestors were capable of matters more. Viewed from the vantage point of Earth's history, and granting that this extends well past humanity's technological scientific history, terrestrial life's reliance on outside help is indisputable. For our textbook, Life in the Cosmos, my postdoctoral fellow, Manas V. Lingam, and I calculated approximately how much more energy the symbiote mitochondrion provides. Boiled down, we conclude that eukaryotes have roughly 2,400 times more power per gene, a heuristic measure of the energy available for protein synthesis, than prokaryotes. In addition, the importance of mitochondria as an endosymbiont is that they create competition among genes within the host cell, and this results in the loss of superfluous genes, and consequently faster replication. The result, the conservation of ATP and a major additional gain of energy for protein synthesis. Why does it matter, this several million-year-old and still incomplete story of the rise of complex life on Earth? Because without mitochondria, there are no eukaryote cells. And without eukaryote cells, no Cambrian explosion, the so-called biological Big Bang. This is when, approximately 540 million years ago, the fossil record shows the emergence of all major animal phylum, the taxonomic rank above class, and followed sequentially by class, order, family, genus, and species. In brief, the evidence suggests that terrestrial natural selection, by the mechanism of endosymbiosis, allowed prokaryote cells to harness the vastly increased energy production of mitochondria, allowing, on a timeline measurable in eons, us. The lessons for humanity on the cusp of a civilization able to sustain itself off Earth are clear. We cannot ignore the possibility that we arose from another civilization's, Noah's, spacecraft. Nor can we fail to take the possibility forward into contemplating our own persistence in the universe. To the tyranny of our current chemical-propelled rockets, we also confront the fragility of terrestrial life when exposed to space. The possibility that cosmic technological selection would allow us to harness a vastly more efficient and powerful energy source might allow us, on a timeline measurable in decades, to become interstellar. The relevance of eukaryotes to their distant descendants seeking extraterrestrial artifacts is found in contemplating Noah's spacecraft. What we have learned about the physical universe was based on the laws of physics that we unraveled through laboratory experiments, sometimes under extreme, artificially manufactured and controlled physical conditions. These laws appear to be universal and apply throughout the cosmos to exquisite precision. Could we extend the same approach to the study of life in the cosmos? This would mean producing synthetic life in our laboratories under conditions that were not realized on Earth, and then checking whether the resulting forms of life or their signatures are found in celestial objects like planets, moons, or asteroids. This endeavor would resemble writing a cookbook of recipes for life. Such a cookbook would prove indispensable to CubeSat arcs equipped with three-dimensional printers. In parallel to laboratory efforts, astronomers can conduct a blind search for life beyond Earth. We can start with objects we can visit on a short trip in the solar system. If we find life on the surface of Mars, in the clouds of Venus, or in the plumes coming out of the cracks in the icy surface of Enceladus or Europa, the follow-up question is whether this life is similar to terrestrial life. Based on our experience with the physical universe, we should be open to the possibility that anything in foreign territories would be very different from life as we know it. If, despite the diverse range of possible life forms available, we find islands of similar forms of life on objects that reside close to each other, then this would suggest that life may have been transferred from one object to another, potentially carried by rocks ejected by meteor impacts. Or We could discover evidence pointing to the possibility that the seeding of life was supervised by an advanced technological civilization that manufactured a plethora of synthetic life forms and decided to match each seed to the environments where it can grow, like a gardener seeding plants in different soils. Or we could conclude that our burden and opportunity extends beyond the preservation of human civilization and to life itself. And no matter what we discover, we elect by our own scientific and technological means to become the manufacturer of a plethora of life. The simplest assumption to make is that dark matter particles do not scatter off each other, just as they do not scatter off ordinary matter. They simply do not interact with matter, ordinary or dark. This assumption, however, leads to tensions between current theory and current observations of dwarf galaxies. What may help resolve the tensions are, no surprise, more data. Observing distant dwarf galaxies, out of which our Milky Way was assembled at early cosmic times, would allow us to probe the nature of dark matter. Such data will soon be obtained. Extending the Webb telescope's exposure time to 3 weeks would allow it to detect dwarf galaxies that are 6 times fainter than those seen in its preliminary deep image. Perhaps we will learn that the challenges to non-interacting dark matter are alleviated by discovering that dark matter is self-interacting. Over a decade ago, the astrophysicist Neil Wiener and I hypothesized that dark matter was, like electrons and protons, electrically charged particles that moved at velocities far below that of ordinary matter. A consequence would be non-interaction with the matter we see. Dark matter would only interact with dark matter. It is a hypothesis that explains some observable data, namely visible differences between the behavior of clusters of galaxies and dwarf galaxy cores. It is also a hypothesis that would call for new physics beyond the standard model. For now, it is one hypothesis competing among others. When pondering our interstellar future, however, it is a hypothesis that suggests a fascinating set of possibilities. Self-interaction allows for the possibilities that there are dark atoms that emit dark radiation and condense into dark stars and dark planets that support dark chemistry that leads to life as we do not know it. In such a case, an answer to Fermi's question, "Where is everybody?" might be, we are blind to most of them. Perhaps in such a dark universe, which enjoys at least 80% more dark matter than our ordinary matter, there are yet more technologically advanced civilizations that have mastered the physics necessary to observe us. And if anyone out there is using dark matter or dark energy to fuel their spacecraft, we will perceive nothing coming out of their engine's exhaust. What we can hope, and with some confidence, is that they are animated by the same spirit of scientific discovery and progress as animates the most hopeful elements of human civilization. The scientific method is guided by data. Favoring evidence over prejudice has 2 manifestations, one practiced routinely and the other mostly ignored. The first manifestation uses the guillotine of data to eliminate possibilities that do not describe reality. The less practiced principle is to regard evidence that deviates from theoretical expectations as an opportunity to learn something new rather than as a threat to expertise that rests on past knowledge. The spirituality of the scientific enterprise rests overwhelmingly in this second, less practiced principle. Here lies a sacred aspect of the Copernican revolution. Not only are we not at the center of the cosmic stage, not only did we come late to the stage, but life as we know it among matter as we know it does not even represent most of the stuff that is presented on that stage. We are more Rosencrantz and Guildenstern than Hamlet and Horatio, and until we figure out what this dark stuff is, we cannot claim to know what the cosmic play is about. And yet we are close, tantalizingly close, to grasping the next rung up the cosmic ladder of civilizations. To the moment when technological selection obviates natural selection, to an empirically proven theory knitting gravity with quantum physics, to new and far, far faster means of propulsion, to sentient artificial intelligence and the pushed outer possibilities of the Hawking limit. All that we currently know about the universe and our place in it suggests a scientific covenant. The meaning of our existence rests in our science-led persistence as sentient intelligence, as a civilization. Therein lies not only our purpose, but the shared purpose of all sentient intelligence throughout the universe, dark and ordinary. For at the highest rung of the cosmic ladder of civilizations, there is no dark, there is no ordinary. There is only fulfillment of a sacred trust, continuance,